I love growth, man, because the common denominator in everything I do is me. And if I get to grow, then everything gets better. My family, my wealth, my success, especially the impact that I make, how I feel about myself, all those things gets better as I continually improve. And in January, I never thought of it this way, but this phrase came to me when I was praying and just meditating, and it said, Henry, and to me it's God, whatever you believe, watching or listening, just listen for the principle of it. It says, love yourself exactly where you are, and love yourself enough not to stay where you are. Because we need to create a sense of love and acceptance of where we are, because sometimes we just keep until the next thing, until the next thing, until the next thing. When I get to this, I'm gonna love myself or feel better about myself. But it's time to build a different relationship with yourself. Most people tell themselves enough truth to be uncomfortable, but not enough truth to be free. So what is the truth? And right now, you can make a decision just to say, you know what? I'm gonna go from living in survival to creation.
And how did you get into this?
You know, for me, when I was 17, I grew up, my family, had the small, they had $200 in their pocket before I was born, came to this country. My dad hid in a trunk to flee a war. They got permission to come to the States. And then 2 years later, I was born. And so we lived in like one small room. I had all this like fears and, trauma in the house, as you said, with dads, throwing things across the house or other things like that. They're very loving and very extreme at the same time. So you grew up with all these belief systems, and I just felt so caged as a teenager, even though I like put the smile on my face. I was like, hey, everyone's like, Henry's so happy. But inside I was like, just tensity. And I just felt stuck, man. And I was people pleasing and validating, and I just didn't feel authentic. And when I was 17, someone put a book in front of me, and I just started flipping through it. And I got to a series of questions at the end of this chapter. And I was like, dude, if I can change, like, I don't have to feel like this.
Right.
And I just got, no joke, obsessed. I was like, if I can be confident, if I can be free, freedom is a really big value for me, man. I just want to have that inner freedom of like being everything I was born to be, like just feeling free.
Right.
I just got obsessed, man. Every seminar, every book, every study, I would develop the courage to like message people and say, can I interview you? People that were on like Forbes lists, or people that were confident, or people that had good relationships. I was like, no, I need to create this life, and I want to understand this thing, because if I understand this thing, my body, my mind, my spirit, my soul, my emotions, then I get to create my life. And I don't want to live a life the way that I felt. I felt like a puppet. I felt like I was a puppet to everything else. I was like, I want to cut these strings and be free, So that's what got me on the kick.
Where did your parents come from?
Lebanon. Yeah,
Lebanon.
My parents.
Oh, you're Lebanese.
Yeah.
My
parents.
For the audience, if you see, by the way, because maybe we'll just like keep going and we won't do the whole sort of counting, right? Because we're well into the show. But like, you're like blonde, blue-eyed, California.
Yeah. They used to call me the mailman's kid, because like my parents are like dark hair, dark eyes, and I look like my grandmother, but here I am, this like blonde, blue-eyed guy in this like Middle Eastern family, and everyone's like, your dad's here. The mailman comes, he has like blonde hair and blue eyes. I was like, it's not my dad, but like, so
that must have left some emotional scars.
Absolutely. So that's another part of it, but it was an interesting journey. I was born in Los Angeles, and born, very much with these extremities of cultures. My family, my dad's dad died when he was 9. So my dad started, taking care of his family. So his development was a little bit different than an average father. And, my dad didn't want to fight in a war. So my dad just, left. And so it's like, you have all this trauma that we had in the home, and a different set of cultures and ideals and understanding. And so it's a very interesting thing to look back at and be like, whoa,
right,
this is what's framed who I am today. But I'm so grateful for the pressure, the extremities of it, because it's really formulated me into understanding myself and people at a high level,
Well, you were saying earlier, right, which is like, and I can appreciate the tug of war culturally that you would have grown up in, right? Immigrant family, maybe, more traditional in values and all of that stuff. Yet you're living in California, LA of all places, right? Which is the fastest of the fast and flashy. and being influenced, right?
Yeah.
So this is what I do at home, and this is where I sort of where I'm in the world. And then you said earlier, which is what you got to a stage where you just felt like you had to cut the strings, and there was this sort of like puppet sort of thing that you were operating on. And
Yeah.
I heard you talk a lot about there, just to paraphrase, which is, part of I ended up being there was because of this tug of war of cultures that I was living in, right? So who am
Right.
I in some capacity, right?
100%.
Cool.
Yeah.
So do you remember the first book, the first course? What was it?
The first book, funny enough, that my cousin put in front of me was a Dr. Phil book, man. A
Yeah.
17-year-old with a Dr. Phil book in front of him. But it was, I think it was called like Life Matters or something like that.
Cool.
And I opened it up, and it was so funny because it wasn't necessarily the content. It was the hope that this book gave me to have a better life.
Wow.
And the content itself, I don't recall a lot of it. I just remember being like, man, if I could be free, if I could change, if I could learn,
right?
I want to learn, man. And it's funny because the tug of war thing that we're talking about, even as one of the first things that I started looking at was my work ethic was nuts, right? I literally worked harder than anybody I knew at the time, right? And as I was doing the work, I would look back and be like, oh my gosh, I'm modeling my father who went to work at 4:30 in the morning and got back at 8:30 p.m. just to feed the family, right? Because that's all he knew. He couldn't work. He didn't have the education. He worked his way up in like the space shuttle world, the aerospace industry. But like I formulated a belief watching my father that you have to work really hard to barely get by. So this programming, as I started doing the work and you start reading, you're like, whoa, what are my belief systems? I have to work really hard to barely get by. I don't want to live like that. So how do I release that belief and embody another belief? And so it's fascinating when you start moving forward and uncovering all the programming that we have from our past, because sometimes it doesn't have to be a big thing like my father escaped a war. It could be something as simple as you disappointed your parents and they said that you failed them. So now you never want to fail again in your life because you're going to lose connection, Right.
Correct. And what you were describing about with the work ethic, like, on the one aspect, I'm like, yeah, that's a work ethic, right? Get up at 4:30 in the morning, you work and like you accomplish, but no, the attachment to that is money is scarce.
Right.
Money is hard to earn. When you work this hard, you're only going to earn that much.
Right.
And, people still have this today, and it's not just the financial limiting beliefs in programming. And I love the fact that you use the word programming because, we are programmed. We are always being programmed, right? And if you're not careful, you're doing that in an unconscious way, which is you're just receiving instead of being a little more intentional about how we choose that sort of program. We do it with our kids. I look at my kids watching this garbage on like YouTube. I'm like, turn that shit off. Right. And I said this the other day, and I had this flashback to in like the 80s with my father saying this to me, right? Which is that's gonna melt your brain, right? And I was like, that garbage is gonna melt your brain. And I was like, oh, that's what my father and parents used to say to me about the garbage that I would watch on TV. Although I think back then the TV was a little better.
Yeah.
And it's true, I do that, I'm in at a very conscious level. I'm like, okay, I don't mind my kids being on, call it, YouTube or the internet, but I really want to make sure what they're sort of digesting through there is very productive stuff, right? I mean, this is a whole conversation in America with TikTok, right? Which is what is the content that's being shown there versus the content being shown here.
Yeah.
That's another podcast for another time, by the way.
I know. I was like, oh man, there's so many things you're saying where my spirit is like, yes. And yes, I'm like, say it louder. It's like, you are so spot on, man. I love that. I love everything you said. I love the thought when you just said it. It's like, are we the program or the programmer? Right? Like that's the thought. It's like, man, I don't want to, as we can be the dead cow. I don't know if that's even a phrase. Is like just saying like, if we're not intentional, then man, we're just going to run the same programs of the past. Right. Which I love the way you put that. That was awesome.
Awesome. Well, let me come back to something that you said earlier. So you were like, I had to release some of these limiting beliefs. What were they? I mean, what were some of the main?
I had one interesting one. So my nickname used to be Passive, which is really weird, right? Because if you know me now, I'll say what I feel. And, I'm really fortunate and blessed to go speak on stages. I just got back last week from Serbia. I was on a stage in front of 35,000 people, right? Wow. 2 times. And it was like really, really cool. But that guy would have not been the same guy before. Why? Because the guy before was passive. He didn't really want to show up and be everything that he was meant to be, and unleash who he was, because he was so scared of what people thought about him, you know? And I maybe used the third party, but like 17-year-old, 18, 19-year-old Henry was just people pleasing, right? He tippy-toed around things and never really said how he felt. And the belief was that, and I'll tell you where it stemmed from, the program, right? The belief was, if I said how I feel, I would lose connection with people, I would dysregulate people, and I would be isolated. Why? Because coming up from a stressed out Middle Eastern passionate family, as a kid, when I said how I felt, it would trigger my father, which maybe meant something would be thrown across the room or something would happen with somebody. So what did I learn as a kid? Don't speak up and don't say how you feel, or else you're going to lose connection from the people you love, or you're going to hurt them or dysregulate them. And then you're going to feel less, quote unquote, safe, even though I was safe. My parents were very loving. But as a kid, you don't really know that. You're like, he's just screaming and yelling and going crazy on me. So I developed this program that said, you know, because the number one directive for our mind, our body, is to keep us safe and then to keep us connected, right? So if I am less safe and less connected when I speak up, my body developed a program that said, don't speak up. Go along with what everybody's saying. You're more connected and more safe. So that was that was the belief, that the safety response that my body had for me, that was limiting me in my life. And so I had to really go through and understand compassionately, my body's just trying to keep me safe. Every behavior is an adaptive behavior. So my body was adapting to my circumstances, and that doesn't serve me anymore. So I go through the process of that belief. So that was a big one for me, man. That was a really, really big one.
That's huge. And like, I mean, maybe there's not a specific answer. And I think this is the problem. And sometimes the world that we live is like, people want the steps. So, okay, so how do you release, you know, what were the 5 things that you did? But just sort of from that question or point, like, what helped, I think, is a better way to sort of phrase the question. What helped you? So you identified it, so that's cool. But then what helped you start to train that muscle to do something differently?
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna go high level, and then we could dive in if you want to.
Sure.
The high level one was, I call it loving self-awareness, a loving identification of what's really going on under the surface, right? Instead of being like, oh, I am just a passive guy that's so scared. It's like, no, let me get curious. Gabor Maté calls it compassionate curiosity, right? How do I get compassionately curious about what is my nervous system afraid of to speak up? There's fear. Fear means my body feels unsafe. My body feels unsafe because there's a message there. Emotions aren't meant to be dictators, they're meant to be messengers. So what's the message? So I get compassionately curious. I understand clearly, okay, where am I at right now with that belief, and where do I really want to be? Right. And so in that middle space, there's a disconnect in that bridge that needs to be built. And so and then I understand the emotions that show up, and I begin to get curious about that emotion, and, you know, and understand myself in a compassionate way, because a lot of us, I'm like, oh, stupid Henry, man, you're passive. And look, everyone's stepping on your feet, and you're not even saying anything. And you try to beat yourself up into healing, and that doesn't work.
I love the fact you just described it that way. You beat yourself up into healing, right? We're our own worst critics. Yeah.
And it's like, and it's hard to me, love is the healer and the transcender. And it's hard to love something you don't accept. Right. And so if I don't really accept and understand, oh, my body's trying to keep me safe, so thank you for that, it may not serve me anymore. That's an old pattern, old belief, old program, just like our iPhone, right? It's like, I'm running a 1994 program and it's 2023, right? And so I just have to understand compassionately, hey, Dr. Stephen Porges says there's no such thing as bad responses, only adaptive ones. Yeah. And so I'm like, interesting. Let me go inward and ask. So this identification is phase 1. Let me understand where I'm at, you know, what's happening on layers, and where do I really want to be? Then the next 3 to me are really, really important. There's an element of past, present, and future. Right. And so the present moment, I call it empower the present moment. This is emotional mastery, emotional understanding. This is where I begin to not be caught up, as Mastin Kipp would say, in my emotions, but with my emotions. Right. And so how can I be with my emotions and begin to understand what's happening with them? You know, and not, as I would say for years, is not losing my agency in it, but actually saying, let me turn my consciousness on and be mindful of what's happening, be more present, be more loving, and begin to empower myself in this moment, creating the certainty that I don't have. So the present moment empowerment. The third phase, so it's identify, then empower the present. Then it's, how do I heal and release from the past, those belief systems in my nervous system? How do I go back and show my nervous system that I'm actually safe now? Right? And that begins with an understanding of do I have the right support system? Do I have new emotional experiences, corrective emotional experiences, that when I speak up, that it's okay for me to speak up. I can actually accomplish the things that I want when I speak up, letting myself know that I'm actually today years old versus 1994 years old, right? And so there's an element of healing the past. It's doing the trauma healing work. It's going inward to your emotions and lovingly addressing those things and not ignoring them, not having that override of like, oh, just push through it. It's like, no, there's a younger part of you inside. There's a little Henry inside that was scared to go speak up. I need to address him and see what he really needs to feel safe. And then the last phase for me, and so this is so high level, the last phase is, so you have identify, you have empower the present moment, you have heal from the past. And then the last thing is, how do I reprogram myself for the desired future? How do I reprogram the belief system, reprogram the identity, reprogram my value system, understand my purpose? And the way we do that, right, is the conscious programming, is the repetition, is giving yourself the new experience, is the consistency, is the visualizations. There's a lot of processes you can do. So that might be really high level and may feel like it's a lot, but to me, it's identify and then past, present, future. How do I create safety in all those areas?
It's interesting as I'm listening to you talk, because and it's not too high level. It's very simple. I think if the audience is listening to what you're saying, what you're not saying is, by the way, go and do these 3 things, and that is it. There are a variety of tools and resources, and there's phases you're going to go through, right?
Yes.
So really when I teach emotional intelligence, I teach really 3 core areas: self-awareness, which is what you talk about, identify the emotions, where do they come from? Also my personality. Why do I react here versus respond here? What is triggering about this voice versus that one? Why is it in this situation, right? And then to your point, which is probably better, I wanted to go back, and just before I go there, because I'll come back to it, but it's interesting that as primitive human beings, there are some core needs, which is to be safe in the village. We do not want to be kicked out the village. I mean, this is the whole genetics and our ancestry. And then as we go through life, we're facing challenges, right? Those programs, right? Your father, the way he used to react, which got you to sort of be passive and boom, boom, boom. But it all stems from that sort of primitive need, which is, I don't want to be kicked out the village, right?
Right.
And our programming, it's almost like we all have that same primitive need. We've just had the different stories around it. And it's the ones that get it, recognize the connection between the stories and that primitive need, right? It's certainty. That's where anxiety comes from. Like, I'm too busy worrying about the future because of what had just happened yesterday, right? Someone just said to me earlier, in fact, I got to quote him, Tim Story, who is just a beast in religion. He says, today's decisions are tomorrow's realities, right? And it really starts to think about how we go into this with our mindset, which is maybe the next piece that we could get into. But I love the fact that, there's an acknowledgement of healing, past, present, and future. And I also heard you say, if I was going to paraphrase a little bit, which is the emotional management isn't not feeling. And I talk a lot about this. Like, emotional regulation doesn't mean that you don't feel the emotion. It's 100%. The fact that you know the emotion so well that you could gauge the temperature of it and when it gets too hot or too cold. Right. And it's about having a little bit of control over that vehicle, right?
Yes, 100%. I say you can have emotions, don't let them have you.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Great saying.
It's like, but emotions, if we don't understand the message of the emotions and push them down, they're going to still be there. They don't go away.
Right. Right. I make a joke. I said, why guys have such big bellies, right? It's not because they don't work out. They're literally shoving all their emotions in their head. The belly's getting big, and people are like, oh, my back hurts. Yeah, well, it's not your back that hurts. It's all the emotional weight that you're carrying around, right?
100%.
So it's an interesting world that we live in. Let me ask your perspective on the world today, right? I was talking about this earlier, which is, I think people are broken. I think the pandemic broke people. in the work that we do, I think we get to see more of a positive side of people's success and growth. But what do you think people can do to maybe become a little less broken and maybe start to, heal a little bit? I think
You
it's
know,
a big question, by the way.
yeah, for me, I think I'd phrase it in a sense of the pandemic revealed a lot in ourselves.
Huh.
You know, I think trials, money, marriage, and trials do something. They magnify what's
Yeah.
inside of you and what's needed, right? And so when you have money, a ton of money, it's not like you change. It's just what's inside of you comes forward. What do you do with it? When you get married, the pressure of that intimate relationship, your core greatness comes out, and also all the stuff that you need, or the struggles that you have, the traumas that you've been storing. In the pandemic, one of the biggest things that you said so well earlier was one of the biggest problems in the pandemic is we isolated.
Mm.
And as you said, we are a social, the co-regulation thing is real. Like, we need each other. There is an element to a community, an element to support, an element to not being alone, and knowing that you're not alone. That's there on top of all the fear that was brought into the world, on top of like, am I going to die? Am I going to eat? What's going to happen next? The uncertainty levels go through the roof. So that pressure, the way I look at it is like, imagine you have water. When you boil the water and the water gets really, really hot, all the crap from the bottom comes to the top.
Right. That's a great analogy.
So the message I would say to anybody listening is, I decided that I'm going to believe something that has helped me. That anything that comes up for me, it means I'm ready to transcend it, or ready to process it, or ready to overcome, or ready to next level it. And so anything that comes to the surface, emotionally, struggles, trials, whatever that is, I say, while it's bubbling to the top, if I don't deal with it, it's just going to bubble back to the bottom, and that same frequency is going to live inside of me. Mm-hmm. So how do I begin to find this right now that we're not in an isolated pandemic situation? First and foremost, a support system is a safe, healthy support system is hands down massively important.
Yeah.
Massively important. And even a mentor like Greg or me or whoever, it's like having someone that also can support and that has walked through it, or you've seen someone that understands you outside of you, I think is massively important. Understanding your needs is massively important, right? If you are feeling certain emotions and we've stuffed it down, like you said, that puts your body in a state of dis-ease, right? It's not healthy for you. It puts you in a stress response. One of the best things that we can do right now, if you're listening, just take a deep breath and just ask yourself, where's been my emotional home? And it's okay. Just know that that's been your body. If you've been in a stressful state, stress is like what does Tony Robbins call it? A sexy way of saying fear. Like your body's in a state of like, oh shoot, oh shoot, oh shoot.
It's ready to go, right? It's jacked up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's okay to like have adrenaline here and there, but we're not meant to live in a perpetual state of stress, right? The blood flow doesn't go through your body well. It's not healthy for you. But the first thing I would say is I'm just going to go with my intuition here is, you need to know that there's hope, that your past does not have to equal your future unless you choose it to be. That maybe this podcast episode is a decision that you get to make right now to say, you know what? I'm going to go and begin to process what I'm feeling. I'm going to go and surround myself with a good support system. I'm going to go look at the stuff that Greg teaches even more and maybe start applying it, or that Henry teaches. I'm going to go through these programs. I'm going to invest time or energy or money or whatever into myself, into therapy, into whatever that is for you, right? A coach. But just understand, coming from, I bet you Greg can probably say the same thing, having been someone that's wrestled, right? And that's had a ton of stuff come to the surface in every area of my life, right? I'm happy to share whatever questions you have, but having struggled with massive insecurity, massive fear, anxiety, death of those that I love the most, like all these heavy, heavy, heavy things in my life, I thought that that's how life was until I realized that it wasn't. That I have this beautiful gift called choice. And the best choice that I could make is to become the chooser of my life. And here now today, I can take a step back and say, you know what? I can honor that what I've what I felt has got me here. And if I keep doing what I've always done, I'm going to get what I always have. And Greg, this thought came to me in January because I love growth, man. Because the common denominator in everything I do is me. And if I get to grow, then everything gets better. My family, my wealth, my success, especially the impact that I make, how I feel about myself, all those things gets better as I continually improve. And in January, I never thought of it this way, but this phrase came to me when I was praying and just meditating. And it said, Henry, and to me, it's God, whatever you believe, watching or listening, just listen for the principle of it. It says, love yourself exactly where you are and love yourself enough not to stay where you are. Because we need to create a sense of love and acceptance of where we are, because sometimes we just keep until the next thing, until the next thing, until the next thing. When I get to this, I'm going to love myself or feel better about myself. But it's time to build a different relationship with yourself. You know, if I walked around with you down the street, man, and every time I brought something up or you brought something up and we have this friend and you're like, Henry, man, I really discovered this thing about myself. And that person's like, man, that's so stupid. Right. You shouldn't be doing that. It's like, after a while, you're going to stop being honest with yourself and you're never going to tell yourself enough truth to be free. But most people tell themselves enough truth to be uncomfortable, but not enough truth to be free. Right. So what is the truth? And right now, you can make a decision just to say, you know what? I'm going to go from living in survival to creation. And that's the beautiful part about it, man. And if you're listening to this podcast episode, you're that kind of person. If you're following Greg, because that's who Greg is.
Right. You're talking a lot about, like, if we're not careful, we seek approval through external validation or confirmation, right? Am I good enough, or do I need to do more? And there's that. I see this with very nurturing personalities. They're so busy filling everyone else's cup.
Yes.
That they deplete, and then it's like they're feeling shit and drained and fatigued, and it's like a tug of war again with them, with like trying to say, in quotations, convince them, all right, you still get to be nurturing, you still get to give and serve, right? But you also need to be a little bit selfish, right? You need to kind of serve yourself first, right? And you practice that enough, people get the balance. And that's what I think is really important in life, and hopefully some of the work that, Henry, that you're doing contributes to people and all of us, which is, we need balance. And I'm not talking work-life balance. I'm talking balance, right? So, I have enough balance and selfishness for myself in balance to my service for others, right? Yes. And passive and aggressive, right? So we got the right balance between passivity and aggression. We've got assertiveness, right?
Yes.
I was listening to you talk about your passivity. Mine growing up was aggression. So that was my way of connecting, which was, in a weird way, is if I attack it and kill it and I'm aggressive, then I don't need the connection, right? And then you never really you never get let down, right? And the other way, and the reason for this was because I grew up in a home where, when one was emotionally stressed, how did you deal with that? Through anger or through aggression, right? It took me a long time to figure that out, right? And a practice today. I say to people a lot, I say, you should have seen my profile, my personality profile 20 years ago. You would think he's a lunatic, he's a psychopath. I'm still the same human being. The difference is I've got different exercises and tools to help manage and tweak and finesse and do. And I love what you're talking about, which is the whole power of choice for tomorrow. And that goes against, goes back to your value of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah. I love that, man. I love that. And I love the self-awareness aspect that you're just talking about is so massive. And it was interesting. I'm a creative, so I love to create songs or poetry or podcasts.
Yeah, I read in your profile, you're a musician. I wanted to come back to that.
Yeah. It's interesting. And so a statement came out of my mouth when I was writing this like spoken word poem. And dude, Greg, it was so cool. It just, it's just bigger than me, right? It said, you're not selfish if you take care of yourself. You're selfish if you don't take care of yourself or only take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I'm like, it's interesting because people think, oh, well, if I don't take care of myself, then I'm selfless. It's like, no, you're selfish if you don't.
Correct.
Because people aren't getting you, the best version of you.
Correct.
But we have this belief of like, and I think in the personal development space or this space or growth leadership, whatever, a lot of people are such givers, and that's such a beautiful thing.
Right.
And like you said, you don't have to stop giving. It's just, how can you add to it that's only going to enhance your giving? I love that you said that, man. That was beautiful. And so the creativity, man, yeah, for music, that was my world for a while, man. It still is. It's been awesome. And
are you a vocalist, a guitarist, a drummer?
Yeah, vocalist primarily, vocalist. I've written songs on guitar and piano back in the day. I have, did some DJing and stuff, but vocalist for a long time, and was in a boy band back in the day, which is really funny. And then stopped that. Started writing my own songs.
What was the boy band called?
It's funny. We took everything off the internet. So, well, there's probably some things. I had somebody. It was really funny. Somebody found a portion of our old music video. It was called, we were called first NXL, then Next Level, but then we ended up as Soulja, SOUL-JAH. But it was awesome, man. We got to work with Destiny's Child's producers, and we had some amazing features on our record. We did a song with on this album that Gladys Knight did, and so it was really cool. Got to tour, and then the stuff hit the fan. The music industry is very interesting, and we just decided to kind of stop doing that and went a different way. So different world, man.
Music industry. I got a few friends that are still in it.
I love it.
It's interesting. Oh, well, I'll share a quick story. I used to work at Club Med back in the day. So at the ages of 18 to 20, we went to work at Club Med as geos, me and my buddy. Right? We thought this was going to be the dream, right? We'd live in the beach all day. Yeah, we'll put some lawn chairs out here and there. We'll drink coconuts. We'll get wasted every night, and we'll hook up with as much as we can, right? Anyway, you get down there, you quickly learn that like you work all day, right? We were in the kids club, but every night there's a show at the resort, right? So one of the nights we ended up in, I don't know how we ended up in this, but we ended up doing this like Backstreet Boys show, right? Me and like 5 other guys, and there was a whole sort of lip singing thing, and it was like, dancing, and very 90s, very, very, very 90s, right? Anyway, there was a guy from France and some bigwig, and he was like, I think we got to take you guys, and we're going to make you the French Backstreet Boys. And I was like, well, none of us speak French. That's super easy. And we got really into it. We thought this was going to be our golden ticket. We're going to be famous. Anyway, that was the first and the last we ever heard from that guy. But that became... a good story to share later on in life.
Did you ever come up with a name for your group?
No, it was a one-time show. We did it once. Right? It was the nightly show at 9 p.m. where all the families came after dinner, and they sat down in the theater, and the curtains came up, and I think it started with Backstreet's Back, right? So,
that is awesome.
Anyway, that being said, you look like you're still in the boy band. I must admit.
I know. It's funny. People are like, because it's funny. My second TEDx talk, I had my leather jacket and my blonde hair, and I brought up the fact that I was in a boy band. I was like, I think you guys probably wonder, like, does he still think he's in a boy band? Because I still have the bleached blonde hair. It was a good season of my life. The thing that I love the most about that season is I think it really taught me the power of pop culture. And the power of influence you could have for good by bigger vehicles, right? You have the podcast, and for me, when I was on stage, and we would be on stages in front of like, one time we got to open it was like 19,000 people in Puerto Rico, it's a big Coliseum. We're opening for a big artist, and I'm sitting with the mic saying, we have everybody's attention. I remember thinking, this is like, as I was doing a personal development growth stuff, I was like, what are we doing with this attention? Like, are we doing good, or are we just like, thrusting our bodies in the air? You know what I mean? And so it really taught me like, wow, what do I want to do with this attention that I have? And it really made me realize that there's a level of opportunity and responsibility that you get when you're in the limelight, quote unquote. And that's why I think what I do now is partnering a lot of the pop culture things. That's why I just got back from a music festival in that, because there's so much good to do in the world in every area, Are you
doing a lot of speaking at like music festivals and stuff? Like there's an audience there for it?
Yeah. And the fun part is, because I was in music and because I've DJ'd and I've done all this stuff, I just got back from a music festival last week where I was, really grateful to speak on stage at the main stage. You had Skrillex and, The Prodigy, and they've had The Cure before, and David Guetta, Martin Garrix, all these people, Calvin Harris. And so throughout the years, and so you're sitting there, and it was funny enough, it's my 14th time, I think, on that stage, which is really cool because like 35,000, 40,000 people. But for me, this is one thing I've learned is like, I was prepared to be on that stage my whole life.
Right.
So because I could stand in between the DJs and my blonde hair and my chain and my things, and I'm not faking the funk. This is who I am. And so I just love music, and I could speak to that audience because I've been on those stages before. And so I think that's the one thing I realized is I do a ton of stuff with festivals and pop culture things and campaigns. We did a project with like Yoko Ono and this music festival for peace, because I'm like, there's a lot of leverage we could use. But one thing I'll tell everybody listening is if I tried to be anybody other than who I was, I wouldn't be on that stage.
Right.
I can't touch the people that you could touch, Greg, in a lot of ways. And I can't touch the people that you're listening can touch. If you're being authentic to who you are, there are people that only you can impact because of your own unique experiences. And that's what I've learned in this space is like, everything I've done has prepared me for what I'm doing now.
Right. My moment of authenticity in the training and the coaching industry was when I stopped wearing suits. Because
awesome.
for years, and like we have clients like US government and tech and just about everything and anything. But it was like, unless you're wearing a suit, you're not an expert. And unless you're wearing a suit, you're not professional. And this is what's expected. And I hated every single time. Every single time. It was the most uncomfortable. Anyway.
What changed it?
I got to a stage where I was like, fuck it. I'm the same guy standing in a suit as I am in a pair of jeans and a black t-shirt. Like, no one's asking me for this. And, certain environments or cultures they're a little more traditional and sticky. And it's funny because it was recently, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I went to a new client that I've never met before. And I was told it's a very traditional organization. And I walked in and everyone was in a suit. All right. And bad suits, no disrespect to anyone. Sport a suit, right? Like you got to update the suits a little bit, but really sort of, black shoes, black pants, white shirt, right? Really sort of engineering, analytical, technical, accounting type of individuals. And I had that moment again. I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm in jeans and a t-shirt right now. I'm like, no, cool. Anyway, the point of it all, it was an awesome, awesome session. The authenticity, the connection, the whole sort of nine. And it was a reminder to me where I was like, you know what, we need to show up in who we are, not in what we want people to, or what we expect or what people expect us to be. Right. And it's not saying that we could be complete maniacs, right? There's obviously a presentation that you operate with, a professionalism, but that was it. So yeah, I've still got all the suits, by the way.
Yeah. The baggy suits.
No, I had some stylish suits. All right.
Okay,
I was up to today to like the skinny suit. All right. Skinny suit, skinny tie. All right. I want to learn a little bit about your company, the Ultimate Impact in Suit for Leadership. What do you do? What is it? What are the programs about?
I've felt this for a long time, and now more than ever. And I don't know if I'm sure you're feeling this. I feel like there's a calling for people to really step onto the front lines. We need good people to be louder. We need love to get louder. We need all the goodness to get better, and all the stuff that's keeping people, that's holding them back on an internal level and an external level. We're in the same boat, right? Like how do I help great people make a greater impact? Because that's what we need. And for me, I feel like there's like a metaphorical whistle being blown in the world, in the universe, of like, time to step forward, time to get on the front lines. We need all the people to start using their gifts and do it for good. And so the premise of it is, man, I just want to love and support people with my 26 years of crazy experience of helping liberate people to be everything that they're meant to be, to give it back to this world, unleashed, unapologetically, full blown, in a state of love instead of fear, right? Living a love-based life. So not only can you have an impact on your own life and your relationships and your family and your success and the impact and whatever that is, and your health, but you also can show up in a way that's more present to give your gifting to the world at the highest level. And so I just feel so deeply called, man, to help good people unleash everything they are. And just taking all the different modalities that I've obsessively studied for the last 26 years, as you know, we have frameworks of how do you help people in each one of those frameworks? How do you get to the really deep identification phase, really understand what's happening under the hood? Where do you really want to be? Understanding, how do I really heal and release from my past? How do I reprogram myself? How do I master my emotions? How do I develop freaking real confidence? And, and then also communication and things like that. But if we can take the goodness in the world and infuse it with all the stuff that we've learned, then we can make this world a much, much, much better place. And so, I've been really, really fortunate in working with these festivals or these corporations or working with influencers and celebrities behind the scenes of like, you have influence and you want to do good.
Yeah.
And even people that are just sitting there like, I just want to do more good in my family. Leadership is also a mother. That's the ultimate form of leadership. A father, a husband, a boss, an employee. So how do you learn to lead not only your life, but the lives of those that you have been blessed to be around? Because I really believe in divine choreography.
Right. I'll share this. You'll like this. One of the things I emphasize and talk a lot about in sessions is leadership is a parental relationship. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's back to your point, like mother, father being leaders. Yeah. And that's where, like, we get into the personal development stuff, which is this stuff, what we're learning to be leaders in the world isn't to be used during 9 to 5. How you show up in your community. It's how you role model
100%.
behavior. It's how you heal. It's how you do all of these things, and you happen to have a job that you have amazing skills to impact and influence and role model and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
I'm always amazed how people are like, no, I'm different at home than I am at work. And I'm like, well, then one or the other. You're either an asshole at home or you're an asshole at work. Which one is it?
That's true. It's so true, man. And a leader also, something you said earlier I love, and it goes along with this, is if I'm caught up in the emotion of everything else, right, and I'm caught up in the world, I'm not really a leader. I am sucked into the energy of everything else. I need to learn how to lovingly, powerfully, presently lead myself, because otherwise I'm getting sucked in. My frequency is going to be in everything else. To be able to influence a room, to be able to influence the cashier that you're talking to, the child that's distressed, the wife that's distressed, whatever that is, there is a sense of loving groundedness within yourself to be able to positively influence versus getting caught up into everything else. So if you go home and you're different because you're getting caught up in the energy of the home, maybe there's a sense of opportunity for growth there as in the leadership for yourself,
Correct. Amazing. Let's switch gears. You also have a podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, man. I love dissecting. What was that?
Sorry. Tell the audience about the podcast.
Yeah, man. It's called Making It Happen with Henry Ammar. It's everybody from like Flavor Flav to a neuroscientist, right? Like, I love just understanding people at their core and what drives them. I love understanding human behavior and how we could take principles from people's lives and apply them practically. I love inspiration, but I love results and transformation way more. And so, for example, like when I looked at Flavor Flav, I was like, he's just very authentic and just raw and real. And I was like, what can we learn from Flavor Flav about being in the spotlight or being a leader in that sense? And, or what can we learn from Dr. Frank Anderson about trauma? But I always ask myself, how can we take something that feels so high level or outside of our realm and make it really practical and simple for people to say, I can apply this into my life? And that's why I do what I do in pop culture, right? Is you want to take these high level principles and bring them down to a level of understanding and practicality. And so my podcast is probably 50% solo episodes, 50% interviews of just people that have come across my path that I'm like, we need to talk. And I would love for my audience to learn something from you, And so it's been a really incredible experience, man. I am so grateful for that podcast because I can't think of one that I haven't learned something myself from. And I recorded an episode about confidence the other day, and and I was like, I just recorded it, and I was listening through it again, and it's so funny because I was about to go into a big event, and I was listening to it, and it like literally gave me what I needed before I got on my event. I just want to provide something that I would want, for people. So, yeah.
On that note, confidence is a big thing. Any tips to build confidence, get that self-esteem more strong?
Yeah, man, do the work, right? Do the work. But I love, I think it was Brian Tracy. I just released a podcast on this, but he said there are 4 C's that could help you have confidence. One is clarity, right? It's clarity in who you are, where you want to be. Man, I got to remember the 4 C's. I just recorded the podcast episode. It's so funny.
Nope.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, dude, it's
trying to think of all the C words: clarity, commitment.
Commitment is one of them. Oh my gosh, dude, that is so funny. I'm going to go through my
communication.
So it is commitment. It's clarity, consistency.
Oh, I like that.
So when you keep showing up and doing something, so getting clarity about where you want to be. If you're not clear, you're unsure, right? If you're uncertain, then it's not that. If I go throughout my day and I don't set my intention that morning, let's just talk about clarity first. And I don't set my intention that morning and I don't decide in advance to get clear about who I am, how I want to show up, or the plan or whatever that is where I want to be. Gaining that clarity gives you a greater sense of confidence because you're not sitting there saying, you create the certainty in an uncertain world, right?
Right.
And so another one is consistency. The consistency. So it's really, really funny, man.
Stay the cause, stay the route, stay the path. While you're looking for that, I talk a lot about this with salespeople, right? I say, there's what makes a salesperson fantastic, really good, successful at sales is consistency. Right?
Yeah.
Doing the same outreach, the same exercise, the same pitch, they just keep doing it. Salespeople that fail are the ones that stop doing the thing that allows them to be successful. And sales has more about sort of the commitment and, as you said, consistency to staying the course of the role and following the process versus anything else.
Dude, 100%. And there's a reprogramming that happens when you're consistent. Like, think about it. We probably sucked at so many things before we did them.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
There's one of the other C's he says, I think it was conviction, but what I see conviction at is resolve.
Right.
It's deciding. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Right. And so for me, I have to understand that I am not going to be good at something right off the bat. Right. And I have to understand that when I go to do it, I'm not going to be great at it, but the resolve will get me to be more consistent. Right. So there's a sense of conviction. So this is what it is. I got it. I'm sorry. It's so funny. I was at a, so just side note, really, really funny. I drove all night last night. We had a hiccup. I got in at 5 a.m. last night and I was in Serbia. So my brain is funky, but so we have clarity, right? Then you have conviction of like, okay, this is what I want. This is who I really want to be. Then deciding I'm convicted in this. I'm resolving to it. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of when, right? There's a sense of resolution, a sense of like, not I want this, but how do I gain conviction? He doesn't say this, but it's adding leverage to that conviction. So for example, if I wanted to be, I'm trying to think of one. Let me give you a real life example of where I'm at right now. I'm creating a brand new music festival. Let's just go there. And I'm not as confident in that because I've done partnerships with them, but I've never built it myself. Right. It's getting clarity of what do I really want it to look like, sound like, feel like, getting conviction of saying, this is my compelling why I'm doing this is so important. It is such a strong why that it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it. I'm fully convicted in doing it. So Darren Hardy gives this example. Imagine you're on an 80-story building, right? And there's another 80-story building. And you look down and the cars are really small and your heart's beating. And there's a plank that goes from one side of one building all the way to another building. And someone said, hey, Greg, I'm going to give you $20 if you go across this. What are you going to say? Oh, no, it's too scary. It's too scary. It's too scary. But what if someone told you, hey, behind you, there's a fire and there's someone you love on the other side. And if you don't get to them, they're going to suffer. You're more likely to be like, I'm going to do this. If it's not a matter of, it's a matter of when I'm convicted to do it. It's a real thing. So creating a really strong conviction of why do you really want to do it? Then it leads to commitment, right? Commitment says, and I always say the feeling you make the commitment in isn't going to be there when it's required to keep the commitment. Mm-hmm. Right? There's an energy of full-blown commitment. It's being committed and then being consistent, right? I like those, but that's the practical 4C side of Brian Tracy. But let me give you what the deeper answer, and I guess I'll just close it there, is the reason why you don't feel confident is because A, you probably haven't done it before. Or B, there's a belief system from your past that is keeping you saying, if I fail, then I'm not good enough. If I'm not good enough, I'm going to be isolated. If I'm isolated, then it equals death. Right. So going back and understanding what we said in the very beginning of this podcast episode, that any emotion you feel of insecurity is your body not feeling comfortable. And whenever you do anything new, you will feel fear and insecurity.
Which is normal.
Absolutely normal. Fear means you're going in the right direction most of the time.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, fear does mean we're going in the right direction. Awesome. All right, we come to
that was a brain funk, dude. That was awesome. So you got to see me and just wrestle through that, man. That's cool. That's it. You know,
I was with you, man. I was hanging on. All right, I got
you. Thank you. and just so you know, Greg is an awesome podcast host because as I'm fumbling, he came in with some gold nuggets as I'm sitting here fumbling through it. That's when you know you're a great podcast host, when you're like, hey, Henry's doing this. I'm going to let him do his thing and I'm going to come in with the clutch, you know?
Correct. No, that's teamwork, brother. You know, it's the dream work, right?
That's right. That's right.
Listen, I really enjoyed today's conversation to the point we didn't even actually count in. Normally it's like we chat and then it's like, you know, all of a sudden the count in and the welcome to the episode. So for the audience, welcome to today's episode. We are here with Henry Ammar and we're going to have an amazing conversation around life and leadership and what it takes to be successful today. Before we ask the last question, which is the better human question, so I'll prep you, which is we're going to ask you, what do you think we all need to do to be better humans tomorrow? Before we go there, let's drop some of your links in the music festival that you've spoken about. Maybe you want to sort of let people know your podcast. Where can people come and follow you, find you, connect with you, the whole night?
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me, man. It's been an honor, truly. My Instagram is at Henry Ammar, HenryAmmar. My podcast, Making It Happen with Henry Ammar. You can find me on any social media. We just love to add any support that I can, man. Truly. The festival is being created right now. It's actually really phenomenal. 2024 is when we're going to launch it. So, there's nothing on it publicly yet, but it's going to be incredible. We're partnering with some of the biggest festivals in the world. So it's going to be a movement around the world, which is really exciting. It's primarily focused on emotional wellness, mental health. So we're going to do some really, really fun stuff with impactful people. And I'm just grateful to be here, man. Thank you so much for having me, man.
That's awesome. Well, if I could participate in the festival, you let me know. I'd be happy.
Thanks, brother. Yeah. Happy
to come and support.
Thank you.
All right. As we come to the last question, what do you think we all need to do to be better humans tomorrow?
Love, man. Love yourself, love others. It sounds like a cliche answer, but the reality is, it's the highest level. It's the highest frequency. It's the highest truth. Whether you believe that God is love, love is God, it's the highest healer, it's the highest everything, or whether you just believe in the frequency of love, whether you just believe in the core value of it, there's nothing greater, and if you could learn to build a better relationship with yourself and others, man, life just gets better,
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Great advice. Great conversation today, Henry. Really.
I'm so grateful, brother. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you. To the audience, we're going to drop all of Henry's links and connection. But if you're not following him on social, all the platforms, I think if you're not on social media today, congratulations. But for the rest of us, go on and definitely, I talk to people about this a lot. You could be very intentional about what shows up in your news, in your feed. And by following guys like Henry and all the other thought leaders and being very intentional about the programming that we're talking about, we could really ensure that we're growing all the time. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you thought today's episode was
Yes.
cool.
Greg, you're awesome.
Thank you, brother.